The Icicle Works, If You Defeat the Enemy, Sing His Song, released in 1987. A brief history of the band. It's led by singer-songwriter Ian McNabb. They released 5 albums between 84 and 1990, broke up in 1991, but were formed in Liverpool in 1980 when one Chris Lane answered an ad in a newspaper that was placed by McNabb. They got together and decided to start making music and writing songs. A 6-song cassette was released in 1981. Released in 82, recording in 81, called Ascending. And then in 83, they were signed by Beggars Banquet Records. A big hit followed, Love Is the Colour, which went into the charts, and that was on their self-titled LP, released in 1984. A Small Price of a Bicycle followed in 1985, and the as said mentioned If You Defeat was released in 87. The band were largely 3 members: McNabb, Lane on bass, and Chris Shand on drums. I don't think I've got that quite right. Sorry, Chris Sharrock on drums. The album included a number of keyboard players who played on various tracks, and one track saw backing vocals by one Alison Limerick. That one's Evangeline. Okay, let's get to the track-by-track review. The album opened up with Hope Spring Eternal, and it has an anthem-like feel, very classic rock style, with the distinct pounding drums that were popular at the time. And there was a lush guitar solo midway through, and it owed a sort of nod to Springsteen, I felt, when I listened to it, and the E Street Band, of course. Track 2 then was Travelling Chest. It skips in and is much more up-tempo than the opener, with some striking keyboards, and there's a nice banjo in the midsection and at the end, although that's not credited on the Wikipedia review of the album. It's a nice enough song, but it's a little MOR and a bit standard, and that's probably a comment that would run right through this review. Track 3 is Sweet Thursday. It's got a nice shimmering keyboard sound which drives the song, which it gets stuck and it becomes a little bit repetitive. But McNabb's vocals are also a little bit pedestrian. It does improve with the rhythm changes way through before it returns to that classic rock stance. Now, track 4 is much more interesting. Up Here in the North of England, it's called, and it has an earthy feel, and it's got a forceful stamp to it. The keyboards are used sparingly, and there's more guitar intensifying the riffs, and there's a lovely squealing guitar solo midway, which wakes everyone up out of the slumber. It's a much more powerful song, waltz-like in places, and the lyrics make a few political points about the north of England being second class to the south, and it concludes with another aggressive guitar solo. Track 5 then is Who Do You Want For Your Love? This is a nice, pleasant pop song. It skips along very nicely. You can sing along to it. It's pleasant enough. It has a nice silky guitar solo, and there's a country style rock and roll feel to it that highlights it really. There's also some nice little harmonica touches, which adds to that country feel. Into the second side now, track 6, When You Were Mine. Touches of the Echo and the Bunnymen here, with the bass and drums solidly driving the rhythm. The sound, it has a sort of stadium-like feel to it, not unlike the Waterboys and their big band sound. Track 7 then, Evangeline. As we mentioned, there's a nice chorus, female chorus from Alison Limerick, and it does add an extra touch to this album, which does get a blandness of feel, but this additional female touch is certainly very welcoming. There's a cutting rhythm guitar that heightens an increased tempo, and as I say, the sound's much fuller with that harmony vocal. It's definitely one of the strongest tracks here. To track 8 then, Truck Driver's Lament. This is much more laid back, but still has that punishing drum sound. There's more echo on the mix of the guitar and keyboards, and I do like McNabb's vocal here. It's more sort of passionate and has more variety. A nice guitar break towards the back end as well, with lots of feedback. So we get to track 9 now, Understanding Jane. Starts off with a neat guitar riff that reminds me of the Ramones. It's a real rock and roll style punk song, very 50s in part, and a bit of a bit of fresh air really amongst all the others here. And the finale is Walking with a Mountain. Things really get toned down a lot here. The keyboards dominate the rhythm. So, in conclusion, a solid album, unadventurous though. It's the third album from them, and they didn't take enough risks as far as I could see. And although it's all very pleasant, it lacks that punch and energy to be up there as one of my favourites for the year. But certainly give it a nice listen. It's an album that does grow on you, and I suggest that you give it a whirl. If you defeat the enemy, sing his song by the Icicle Works, released in 1987.